We all remember those school field trips, right? The excitement of getting out of the classroom, the bus ride with friends, the new sights and sounds. They're supposed to be memories we cherish, but for some, these innocent excursions twist into something dark, something unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Tonight, we're venturing into those shadows. These are 4 stories from people who went on a field trip and came back changed. Our first story comes from a man named Leo, who was in the 6th grade when his class visited an old, preserved colonial village. You know, the type cobblestone streets, historical reenactors churning butter, the whole 9 yards. It was a beautiful autumn day, but a chill clung to the air that had nothing to do with the weather. Leo and his best friend, Mark, were bored with the official tour. They decided to sneak away from the group and explore a building that was marked as staff only, the old village infirmary. The door was unlocked, which should have been their first warning. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something medicinal and faintly metallic, like old blood. They tiptoed through the main ward, past rows of empty iron frame beds. It was creepy, but they were boys, fueled by a sense of adventure. In the back, they found a smaller room, an old surgical theater. A single, rusty operating table sat under a skylight, covered in a stained canvas sheet. Mark, ever the daredevil, pulled the sheet back. Underneath, the table was clean, almost unnaturally so. But that wasn't the scary part. As Mark's hand brushed the cold metal, all the color drained from his face. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with a terror Leo had never seen before. "I felt it," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Someone." They were screaming, so much pain. Leo didn't feel anything, but the pure fear on his friend's face was contagious. He grabbed Mark's arm to pull him out, and that's when he heard it. A faint, wet cough coming from the corner of the room. They froze. There was no one there. The cough came again, closer this time, followed by a soft, dragging sound. They didn't wait to see what it was. They sprinted out of the infirmary, not stopping until they crashed back into their bewildered tour group. Mark never spoke about what he felt in that room again, but for years afterward, Leo would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in a cold sweat, the sound of a phantom cough echoing in his ears. Next, we have a story from a woman named Chloe. Her high school biology class took a trip to a remote state park, famous for its sprawling cave system. The plan was to spend the day studying geological formations and the unique cave ecosystem. The main cavern was breathtaking, lit by installed lights that made the stalactites and stalagmites glitter like jewels. But Chloe was a bit of a rebel. While the teacher was explaining calcite deposits, she noticed a narrow, unmarked passage off to the side, a small, hand-painted sign near it. Simply read, "Danger. Unexplored." That was all the invitation she needed. She slipped away, flashlight in hand, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The passage was tight, forcing her to squeeze through in some places. After about 50 feet, it opened into a small, perfectly circular chamber. In the center of the chamber was a pool of water so clear and still, it looked like a black mirror. Fascinated, she knelt at the edge and shone her flashlight into it. The beam didn't seem to penetrate the darkness. It was like the light just stopped. Curious, she dipped her fingers in. The water was ice cold. As she pulled her hand out, she noticed something strange. The water clung to her skin. Not like water, but like thick, black ink. It wouldn't shake off. Panicked, she tried wiping it on her jeans, but it just smeared, staining the denim. Then, a ripple disturbed the surface of the pool. Something was moving down there. It wasn't a fish. It was large, and it was pale. A long, white arm, thin as a bone, slowly emerged from the inky depths. It didn't have a hand, just long, spindly fingers that stretched towards her. Chloe screamed, a raw, primal sound that was swallowed by the cave. She scrambled backward, crab walking away as the arm reached further, its fingers twitching. She turned and fled, not caring if she scraped her body against the rock walls. She burst back into the main cavern, gasping for breath, her clothes torn and her body covered in scratches. Her teacher rushed over, asking what happened. She tried to explain, pointing to the passage, babbling about the arm in the pool. But when they looked, the narrow opening was gone. There was just a solid wall of rock. Her classmates thought she'd had a panic attack. But Chloe knows what she saw, and to this day, a faint black stain remains on her jeans. A mark that no detergent can ever wash away. Our third account takes us to the coast with a university marine biology class. A student named Sam tells this story. Their class was on a multi-day trip, staying in a rustic research facility right on a secluded stretch of beach. One of their assignments was to collect specimens during low tide at night. So, there they were, a group of 20-somethings, wandering the wet sand under a full moon, headlamps bobbing in the darkness. It was peaceful, almost magical. Sam wandered further down the beach than the others, drawn by a strange, low humming sound. He thought it might be a generator, but it sounded more organic. The humming led him to a cluster of large rocks that formed a small coat. Lying on the sand, tangled in a mess of seaweed, was what he first thought was a large, beached seal. But as his headlamp beam fell upon it, his blood ran cold. It was vaguely humanoid, but its skin was a sickly, translucent gray, and its limbs were too long. Bent at odd angles, it had no face to speak of, just a smooth expanse of skin where features should have been, and the humming was coming from it, a deep, resonant vibration that he could feel in his chest. It was clearly alive. As he watched, horrified, one of its long arms twitched. Sam didn't even think. He turned and ran, sprinting back towards the lights of his classmates, shouting for them to get back to the facility. They thought he was joking at first, but the sheer terror in his voice convinced them. They all run. The next morning, they convinced their professor to go back to the cove with him. Sam pointed to the spot, his heart hammering against his ribs. There was nothing there. The sand was smooth, as if washed clean by the tide. There were no tracks, no seaweed, nothing. The professor told Sam he must have been tired, that the moonlight can play tricks on the eyes. But Sam knows. He knows that thing was real. He says the worst part wasn't seeing it, but hearing it. That low, constant hum is a sound he can never unhear. It's the sound of something ancient, something that doesn't belong in our world, waiting just beyond the reach of the tide. Our final story tonight is perhaps the most unsettling. It comes from a former teacher, a woman in her late 50s named Mrs. Gable. For 20 years, she organized the annual 8th grade trip to the nation's capital. It was always the highlight of the year. On this particular trip, they were visiting a vast, somber military cemetery. The students were meant to be finding specific graves for a history project, but the sheer scale of the place, the endless rows of white headstones, had a sobering effect on them. One of the quietest students in her class, a girl named Sarah, approached Mrs. Gable, looking pale. Sarah said she had to go to the restroom and pointed towards a small, isolated brick building on the edge of the grounds. Mrs. Gable nodded, telling her to be quick. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Mrs. Gable started to worry. She walked over to the restroom building and called Sarah's name. There was no answer. She pushed the heavy door open. The room was empty. A cold dread washed over her. She checked the stalls, her calls growing more frantic. Nothing. She organized a search, first with the other chaperones, then with the ground staff, and finally, the police. They searched every inch of that cemetery and the surrounding area. Sarah was gone. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation turned up nothing. No witnesses. No signs of a struggle. The media frenzy was horrific. Mrs. Gable was vilified, the school was sued, and her career was destroyed. She left teaching and moved away, haunted by the face of the girl she had lost. But the story doesn't end there. About 5 years later, Mrs. Gable received an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a single, old-fashioned photograph, the kind from the early 20th century. It was a picture of a familiar man, a woman, and a young girl standing in front of a small house. The little girl in the photo was Sarah. She was wearing an old-fashioned dress, her hair in braids, but it was unmistakably her. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were looking directly at the camera with a hollow, empty expression that chilled Mrs. Gable to the bone. There was no note, no return address, just the impossible photograph. Mrs. Gable never found out who sent it or what it meant. Was Sarah a ghost all along? Was she taken by something in that cemetery? Or is the truth something far more bizarre and terrifying? She'll never know. She just lives with the silence and the image of that little girl in the photograph, lost to a time she never should have been a part of. Thanks for watching. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share, drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more dives into the darkness. Stay safe out there.